believe there'll be a more important bill other than this bill that we pass long-term for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Mr. President, as most of you recall, the floor amendments to Senator Saslaw's bill changed the bill in some ways. It basically took a $15 a rate of $15 an hour, and it took it to $11.50, but then it allowed for inflation to take it back up to $15. Mr. President, the floor amendments I have before you is truly an opportunity to vote for a regional plan. And I hope you will pull it out, look at them, understand them, and then I know you'll vote the way that you see best for your region. Mr. President, I am very concerned after reading through the provisions of what we've passed and even what we've put in to committee here, that once you get into the details of it, we've empowered the commissioner to come up with an inflationary plan that I think is going to be extraordinarily injurious to much of the state. And if you'll bear with me, Mr. President, what you will have in front of you is an opportunity for those of us that live in Central Virginia, in Southwest Virginia, in Southside Virginia, those of us that live just south of Richmond and the Shenandoah Valley, to have a different tax rate. Mr. President, some of you may ask, well, is there any precedence in the country for having a true regional plan? And the answer is yes. You don't have to look any further than the state of New York to see a absolutely, truly regional plan. Mr. President, in the state of New York, not a conservative bastion, there is the New York City, those covered by over 11 employees have a rate. Those under 10 employees have a rate. Those that are in Long Island and Westchester have their own rate. And those that are in the rest of the state, Rochester, the entire rest of the state, have a different plan. Mr. President, that regional plan is one that I think works for that state. But, Mr. President, what I'm asking us to consider doing is taking the rest of the state from $725 an hour to $850 next year, and then on to $950, which is an amount that I know that some in my area don't care for, but at least at that point, stop and pause and see what we've done. Mr. President, I would hope that we would do this. So why would we do this? Mr. President, I would tell you that I'm standing on the floor today because I believe that if we pass the bill as written, there'll be no item we do here with greater economic impact than this bill. Mr. President, I believe that you're going to see jobs in our part of the state leave. I believe that you're going to see a draining of economic development. And let me tell you what I think the canary in the coal mine is going to be. Some of you enjoy watching the governor's announcement on economic development and job, and I do too. I love to see that when it's Scott County and Botetourt County and those counties that are in my area or west. But I've got to tell you, if you're thinking about bringing jobs to that area, and you're thinking about even paying much more than the current minimum wage, let's say you're going to pay $12 an hour. You're planning to pay $12 an hour. Once you produce $11.50, inflation going to 15, the compression for those manufacturing jobs are going to eliminate the capability for those people to come in and be able to actually put those jobs in and not have compression with Walmart and other individuals. Mr. President, you know, there is, in my opinion, no consideration in the current bill for the job size or the business size. I wish we had followed New York on that, considered New York on those items. There is no consideration in the current bill on economic impact. Once it's done, it's done. And yes, someone said, well, we could come back down here and change it, but I'm pretty sure that other parts of this Capitol would most likely struggle with that. Mr. President, there is no one that has considered the economic impact or tax loss on local government. We did that in part in our state budget because we knew we'd have to pay more. So there's I think it's $150 million in there to cover that. But there's no thought whatsoever of what closing this many jobs, having fewer people employed, is going to do on our economics for either the state or local governments. Mr. President, I think this is going to hurry automation. You may have heard automation is coming. I think this is going to produce automation in a fast pattern. Mr. President, nothing has impacted our region of the state and manufacturing like NAFTA. NAFTA was a tremendously difficult item. It hurt us. We should have never agreed to NAFTA. Mr. President, after that came along the Federal Trade Commission, and what they and the Chinese were able to do to our southwest portion of the state was incredible. They had a rule that passed that most of us didn't pay much attention to, that is said if you did damage the industries in the United States from China, that the money no longer went to the company or the employees, the money went to the federal government. That destroyed some of our furniture, textiles. It meant that even after they were getting damaged, they couldn't do anything about it. Mr. President, I've heard from so many of my employers who now are willing to raise the minimum wage. And as many of you have been hearing me say, I have maybe been delinquent. Maybe I've not voted as much for some of these as I should. And if I get this amendment on, I will vote for this bill, because I think that the boot of government will be off of really what is a very poor part of the state. I've heard from my YMCAs, my disability community, from the veterans, and they are very concerned. I know some of you haven't heard of towns like Gretna and Rustburg and Stewart and Rocky Mount, but I'll tell you this, Mr. President, it's going to have a dramatic impact on those areas. Mr. President, my amendment asks you to consider having a true regional approach. It is one that will give us, much like they have in New York, that 850, 950 and pause for the study. Mr. President, if we do not do this, I think we will look back on this day and we'll think about what has ended up happening, and we'll say, aren't we sorry about what's happening in Central and Southwest Virginia? We'll talk about the fact that, well, we can do something for you with TANF. We can do something on unemployment. We can give you aid to the localities. We can give you more 599 money. Mr. President, we're not asking for that. We're asking to get a reasonable approach to jobs and economic development. Mr. President, I know this is complex and there are people on all sides and interest groups hanging around. But, Mr. President, I hope that there would be some consideration to what I think is a reasonable plan that will give us a true regional approach to the minimum wage. Mr. President, thank you for the time.